Hey everybody, Off the Mic Sports Network here. Another edition of Off the Top Rope. Let's talk a little bit about NXT and Ricky Saints, because that's been a big topic in the wrestling community. Whether you're an AEW fan or you're a WWE fan, you are talking about what happened on NXT on Tuesday night. Because I've been saying this for close to a year. Ricky Starks Saints, whatever you want to call him, is an absolute, and that is a wordplay thing because that's his gimmick. He is an absolute superstar. And the fact that AEW only gave that guy one tag team title reign is a joke. It's a joke. So when fans in Cincinnati on Tuesday night during the main event were chanting Tony fumbled, and then an hour and a half after Ricky Saints got the win in the middle of the ring in the same building that AEW was in 6 weeks ago with, new name, new gimmick, new lease on life, looked genuinely like thrilled to be back in a wrestling ring. Tony Khan goes on and decides to put propaganda out and prop up his show for Wednesday night, saying, "Yeah, we're on a great run and we make great pay per views." I was like, "What are we doing?" You can tell he is a small man by just going to the internet after he got publicly shamed again. And then here's another example of why I am just so frustrated with the AEW fan base. Because for some reason, fans think that, oh, that just because Tony Khan has a loaded roster and has some of the most talented people in the world, that he hasn't fumbled. Because let me read you this tweet. Guy in response to the Tony fumble chant, quote retweets or reposts or whatever the hell you call it on Elon Musk X. Says, imagine chanting that about a man who has Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega, Swerve Strickland, MJF, and Hangman Adam Page. Okay, let's break this down, actually. So if we're going to go on this premise and, this whole thing that Tony didn't fumble because he has the five men that you've mentioned. All right, let's crunch the numbers here for a second. Will Ospreay has an international title run. He is now in a makeshift tag team with Kenny Omega and is fighting Kyle Fletcher now for the third time in the last 3 months in a steel cage, which would admittedly, Will Ospreay is great. But what has Will Ospreay done that even remotely is distinguishing? He's lost a decent amount. He lost to Ricochet. Granted, it has helped Ricochet grow. Kenny Omega nearly died a year ago. Kenny Omega is just getting back into the ring, and he looks like his old self. But Kenny Omega, let's be real, as good as he is, he's not the world champion. He hasn't been the world champion in close to 4 years. Swerve Strickland is the most recent world champion on that list, yet he lost it to the legend Bryan Danielson, and that title reign from Bryan Danielson was parlayed into what we are at now, the worst world championship run in any major promotion, maybe since WCW, is what this Death Riders run. It is bad, and I don't know if it's going to end anytime soon. MJF, longest reigning AEW world champion. MJF's great, but let's call it what it is. That world title run is a big reason why AEW is in the position that they're in. They catered to MJF. There were some underwhelming matches, and then an underwhelming payoff with Samoa Joe. I love Samoa Joe getting the championship, but then you had the whole Devil storyline not get paid off. It was a mess. And then there's Hangman Adam Page, and you guys know how much I love and adore Hangman Adam Page. I think he's one of the best in the world. Some people will fight me and basically say, well, Logan Paul does his moveset better. I'll tell you this, Logan Paul ain't half the character that Hangman Adam Page is, given he went from beloved face to hated heel to now conflicted cowboy again, and it's wonderful to watch on television. And I can't wait to see Hangman and MJF face off against each other at Revolution. But you named those 5 guys. None of those guys are the world champion, and the world champion is an ex-WWE guy on his 4th title run already in the worst gimmick that he's had in his entire career. And I like Jon Moxley, but this is bad. So that's your argument to say that Tony Khan didn't fumble? Let me just say this for the record. Ricky Saints in 3 weeks is already better than what Ricky Starks was in AEW for 5 years. Ricky Saints has been in WWE for 3 weeks. He was in AEW for almost 5 years. And he doesn't even, and Ricky Starks doesn't even feel close to the guy that they presented on television the last 3 weeks. Ricky Saints feels like an absolutely massive deal. And I would make the argument, I think NXT kind of needs him. He's ready for the main roster already. He already looks bigger than NXT. He's not even the champion. And fans will come at me and like they'll be mad. And I saw a couple of people insulting Ricky's entrance music. Yes, it's a Def Rebel theme, and Def Rebel in general sucks. But I got to tell you, man, that was a bop. And Ricky Saints, in the current gimmick that he's in, I understand that it is some level of a version of the Ricky Starks character. But let's get real. This is Ricky being Ricky. This isn't Sasha Banks, Mercedes Varnado, taking the Sasha Banks character, renaming it Mercedes Moné, and being CEO instead of the boss. That's the lack of originality that's going on in AEW. So don't give me that crap that Tony Khan didn't fumble, or that this is the music is like, corporate slop. I heard that expression. Guys, this is what happens when a big time star gets big time star treatment in a big time promotion. AEW continues to look like the minor leagues. We saw this with Jade Cargill, and some people will fight me about this on Jade Cargill. Jade Cargill had a 500-day TBS title run, which they're probably going to surpass with Mercedes Moné's run. And I think that's ridiculous, but that's because Tony Khan is petty. But Jade Cargill already felt like a bigger deal. And I understand that she's been out since November with an injury. She'll be back for WrestleMania season and probably have a decent angle with Naomi, Bianca Belair, maybe both of them. Who knows? But Ricky Saints is another example of what happens when a talented individual actually has creative and stuff to back him up. Because it's great that, hey, you have the 5 guys, 90x7 on X. It's great that, hey, Tony Khan has the 5 people who are 5 of the most talented men in the entire world. But again, let's crunch the numbers. Ospreay ain't the world champion. Kenny Omega ain't the world champion. Swerve ain't the world champion. MJF ain't the world champion. Hangman Adam Page ain't the world champion. And I think that's ridiculous. He should have been the world champion. Jon Moxley's the world champion. And nobody cares about Jon Moxley. Everybody hates the Death Riders. Even the diest of the diehards in AEW hate him. Ricky Saints, not even having a title in his first match 3 weeks in, already feels like a bigger deal than the 5 guys that you just mentioned to me. Already feels like a bigger deal. Like, I think they could instantly put Ricky Saints on the main roster tomorrow, and he would feel like he belonged there. The NXT needs a guy like Ricky to, tie everything together. And I don't know how long he's going to stay, but he is ready to go to the main roster because he's now got the creative, and we already knew he had the talent and the charisma and the ability to talk, and just like everybody was just going crazy for this guy. But man, these AEW incels who keep convincing themselves that AEW, just because they have a high-priced roster and some of the most talented performers in the world, thinks that they're a success, and you got a new contract, that doesn't mean shit. NXT's the 3rd promotion, and they're outrating you on a regular basis because they present their talent like they are big deals. Moose comes in on Tuesday night. Moose was a throwaway character in the TNA partnership that they had 4 years ago. Let's call it what it is, man. Ricky Saints in 3 weeks is already a bigger deal and more of a superstar than Ricky Starks was ever in almost 5 years in AEW. That is a big indictment on Tony Khan, which is why the entire audience in Cincinnati was chanting Tony fumbled multiple times during the main event. Because they know what is going on here. You had Ethan Page, another example, who's already been a champion, and he hadn't even been in WWE for a year. And he's already presented like a big deal. Javon Evans, who was Jay Malachi. He was a jobber taking pinfalls to Jeff Jarrett on AEW Dark and AEW Dark Elevation. That kid is a star, and he's only 20, 21 years old. Wes Lee is outstanding, and he's actually done a really good job with this heel character that he has. The point is, if you're one of these idiots who's trying to convince yourself that somehow, some way, Tony Khan is going to turn this around or Tony Khan knows what he's doing, look at the tweet that happened 90 minutes after NXT went off the air. The guy's in his own feelings. He's clearly bothered because he knows he didn't have a chance, man, because he doesn't know what he's doing creatively. He wants to do it his own way. And even if he's going to try and fix things to please his fans, he doesn't care enough to make the effort to do that. Because if he did, somebody like a Ricky Starks maybe would have been convinced to say it. Probably wouldn't have happened because of his ties to Cody. But I think you're going to start to see, based off what's happened with Jade Cargill, based off what happened with Ethan Page, all of these people. Brian Pillman Jr., the Lexus King, he has become a great performer to watch because he's actually been given an opportunity to shine. Sean Spears might be the NXT North American champion next week. We'll see. I don't know, but you look at those examples of people that have just come over and effectively, I know, defected back to WWE or are in WWE for the first time. More of these are going to start happening. And it's going to continue to be more and more of a case of how Tony Khan continues to fumble a golden opportunity to run a wrestling promotion because he thinks it's a hobby. That's what it is. But again, all this is about is the absolute one from New Orleans, Ricky Saints. Even if you don't like the name, he looked like a massive deal. Looked like a bigger deal than what we saw in AEW. And Ricky Starks in AEW was cool, fucking cool. He's even cooler now. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.